Hello and welcome to Startup Europe, the Sifted Podcast. This week, we're taking a break from the news to bring you a longer form interview, and today I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by Sachin Duggal, founder of Builder.AI, a London-based company that uses AI to help its clients easily build software applications. Builder was launched in 2016 and now employs more than 1,000 people and has raised more than $400 million in funding from top investors like Insight Partners, Lakestar, Microsoft, and the Qatari Investment Authority. Before Builder, Sachin began his career at Deutsche Bank and went on to found 2 software startups in Silicon Valley. Today, he finds himself at the center of the tech world's most hype sector of the moment as artificial intelligence companies continue to raise huge sums at high valuations. Sachin, thank you for making time in your busy schedule. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So can you explain a little bit of background? What do you guys do exactly at Builder.AI, and how did you have the idea to build this business?
So, the real answer is we tried to get someone to build an app for us. In 2016, we were building, but even before actually, we were building a photo sharing app with a great backend, recommended sharing. What we see today, it still not delivers kind of what we built from the backend where it could tell you were having pictures with someone. So we were trying to build a front end app. Every single time we tried to get someone to build it for us, we got rogered. And so if a bunch of engineers out of good schools can't get someone to build software, you had like that aha moment, which is, well, clearly it's not that simple. And then sort of having done a bit more homework, a lot of these businesses you think about from a trends perspective, right? And so the first trend was we didn't think there were going to be any more traditional businesses left. Everyone was going to be software powered or software first. If that was going to happen, then just the sheer volume of people building software was going to increase exponentially. And today we have a real shortage of developers. And it's kind of like a 1:10 ratio of supply to demand. Demand to supply. Supply to demand. And so you don't have enough people. You have lots of people building software who are not technical. And I think that was the key. Our average customer, thinks Java is a coffee bean you buy at Starbucks. And they probably use Excel and a calculator at the same time rather than, write complex formulas. And we started to see what was going on in this space overall. So and the 2 things really sort of popped out. Everyone was trying to build these applications. They weren't that different, but it was really hard to pinpoint what was the same, what wasn't the same, because the ontology was always you have software applications and then you have code. We always talked about features, but there was no list of features anywhere in the world. So login for me versus login for you could be slightly different shades of gray. And that got us sort of thinking, saying, well, software applications are just a combination of features. And that sort of seems obvious, but we'd never really deconstructed software that way. And that features have relationships with each other. Like a really simple relationship is you can't log out before you log in, but that's a math relationship. And when you started to see this, you suddenly moved from a world where you needed consultants to a world where blocks of code and design actually had mathematical relationships with each other that you could emulate on some sort of model or data store like a knowledge graph. And I'd say the very last thing is you then had this, which is a little bit scary in the beginning, you had this entire low-code, no-code movement, which if you ask me honestly, fell flat on its face. Because a lot of people rebadged themselves from being SaaS to being no-code. And you had to just pierce the surface and you'd realize to implement a CRM system, the licensing fee might be $20,000. The implementation cost is $200,000. And so what you started to see was every single time you saw low-code, no-code pop up, for every $1 of software revenue, it was $9 of customization revenue. So you'd have to ask yourself, where is the no-code? And to me, I think the biggest breakthrough from at least how we were thinking about the problem was not so much a technology issue, was really trying to segment the customer properly. So our customers, and I say this after 6 years of doing this, more than 6 years of doing this, but our customers are not creators. Our customers are curators. And it sounds like a subtle difference. It's vastly different. So if I gave someone a white canvas and said, go build anything, most people's heads blow up because they're like, what? I don't know. Where do I start? If you give anyone a blank piece, if you give a 5-year-old a blank piece of paper and say, draw me Picasso, they won't know where to start. You give them 5 paintings and say, you can rip this apart. And actually, you might have something you put on the wall. And that really was sort of how we've approached this. So Builder is a composable software platform. We tried to stay away from the low code, no code wording. It's like Lego for code. Think of a car assembly line. And then AI that helps these features come together and go through the car assembly line. But we know that everybody wants their thing to be that little bit unique. And as anyone who's ever done a PowerPoint, most people can't use Google Slides or PowerPoint, but they're very good at delivering a presentation. And so we've then got these experts that do that last mile finessing and allow you to build it. So any kind of software application, mobile, web, soon conversational, and our customer really just tells the platform what they want.
And so give me a couple examples of like some of the apps that have been built through this.
Yeah, so we I give you different segments. So large enterprise, it's like the size of Costco in Southeast Asia. Their entire software stack, from the order management, the picking app, which tells you which, where the tomatoes are, where the non-perishable items are, like that entire block of applications is built on Builder. Then you go to the other extreme, we're helping the Ports Authority of Singapore figure out how to manage container load. You go to another extreme, we helped a nursery school in London build a parent-teacher app. You go to an even smaller extreme, like we've helped a restaurant build a restaurant app. So you can go right the way from a micro small business up to an enterprise. We're helping a big airline build a driver app so that, they have a chauffeur service. And like it was all legacy, and now they're like, listen, we need to build something that allows our customers to be able to talk to the driver and sort of do all that connect. So that sort of sets the length and breadth.
And how long does it, obviously you said you work with super small clients to super big clients, but what's like the average length of time that would take, one of those apps would take, and maybe how long would that have taken?
Traditionally is so hard because unfortunately the consulting industry has prided itself on giving the lowest price the fastest time just to get the contract. And then they basically get you on the change request. And if you imagine, most customers are not technical, so what they think it's going to start with and what it ends up are very different things. From our own timeline perspective, the micro SMB, so if you are a restaurant or a retailer, I'd say it's somewhere between 2 and 5 days. So it's pretty quick. It's faster than Shopify, as an example. And you don't have to pay us a share of the revenue. As you go further and further up stack and it becomes bigger and bigger, it's kind of like how long's a piece of string, depending on the number of features you have. So the more features you have, the more time it takes. What I'm seeing right now is the average time from first conversation to something shipped, final thing shipped, is hovering around 3 to 4 months.
Okay, that makes sense. And
to answer the fuller question, I'd say that same 4 months, if you went to a human-only team consulting process, you're probably looking at somewhere between 12 to 18 months. Just to give you an example, like we would produce your spec in 45 minutes. They would do the same thing in 4 weeks. We would produce a prototype in minutes because we use a neural net to do it. They would produce that prototype in 2.5, 3 weeks.
And you talked a little bit about that like flow, right? And how AI fits into that. But can you talk a little bit about like how your AI tech stack works? Do you guys build models yourselves? Do you use open source models? What does that look like?
So let's go back to sort of how we use AI first, right?
Yep.
So, other than what we're doing with Natasha, we don't sell AI. Like for us, the use of artificial intelligence and the full gambit from computer vision to knowledge graphs to LLMs is it really around two paradigms. One, how do we remove human variance? We've all had a great customer sales experience and a bad customer sales experience. We've all had a great call center experience and a bad call center experience. It's always down to the person at the other end. And so there's massive amounts of variance because the knowledge that individual has derives how the end customer experience might be. And so we've got that one shape. Second shape is how do we remove wastage or work that doesn't need to be done by a human. And so I give you an example. So we we have a computer vision system. It's built internally that looks at defect detection. So it looks at the design, and then it looks at the built application across 1,000 devices. But it does it in 30 seconds, every single screen. Right? If you imagine a human QA engineer, there's no QA engineer in the world that could look at 1,000 devices in 30 seconds. That falls into the world of, we don't need a human to do this process because it's a computer vision problem. Another one is, even if you buy Salesforce, you'll speak to a Salesforce consultant. They'll tell you best process, they'll customize, they'll go through that entire conversation, right? What features you need, how you do it. We've got a knowledge graph. It's built internally, which models features, relationships between features. So if you imagine our knowledge graph has, like, for example, just features, that's about 650 nodes. Those 650 nodes have hundreds of thousands of relationships between them. Like, you can't log out before you log in, right? That you can't log in before you sign up. These are all mathematical relationships modeled on the graph. What features have an impact on another feature from a customization perspective or a timeline perspective. So that's another good example. And then more recently, so our first version of conversation analysis, we worked with BERT, open source model. But we customized BERT for what we wanted to do. And then as you started to see the LLMs really progress, we've done a bunch of things. Like, we work with a number of the LLM providers for the general purpose handling, but we then actually have our own model look at their answers. We do things like intent detection. I have a really funny story. So when we were building the first version of Studio Store with Natasha.
Can you talk a little bit about what Natasha is?
Yeah, so Natasha's like it's the name for all of our AI, but specifically for the conversational agent. And so we're allowing people to come in and say, after, like, what's your name and all of that. Oh, what are you trying to do? I need to sell ivory tusks online. Now, a human wouldn't say that to another human, because, like, just the fear of, like, what's the person going to think? When you're talking to an AI, kind of like all the guard vanishes. But we don't want to suddenly generate pictures of ivory tusks and put them on a commerce store that someone then takes a picture of. Number one, it's wrong. Second thing is they take a picture of it, go post it somewhere else, and then we're really rogered. And so we had to start doing this ability that, like, Natasha is not just taking ChatGPT and plugging it to the customer. She's effectively, an AI in the middle. So she's looking at the question coming in. Can she answer the question using our model with BERT and everything else we've done? If not, she's going to ChatGPT or to Bard and saying, here's what I know about the customer. Here's everything. Here are all the features being discussed. Here's all the background contextual knowledge, effectively prompt engineering, getting the answer back, and then looking at the answer and saying, like, does anything in this answer, again, using a version of BERT, does anything in its answer glare out as problematic? If so, send to a human. So that's a really good example. I would say that novel model creation, if we've done it, is very limited because it doesn't make sense. What makes more sense is actually taking a hybrid view. So the knowledge graph is entirely built by us. It's very custom, but it's the software brain that allows us to make decisions. Models run on top of it, but we have to train them. Our data set's really unique because we're really one of the few folks that have taken any kind of software application, broken it into features, and then model the relationship. So do we build models from scratch? No. If we have, it's probably a handful. In most cases, we're using open source models that we are then customizing. But really what's key is, in many cases, it's not a single model problem. So we cascade or daisy chain the models. That's what makes it really unique. And that's where our team spends a lot of time.
And I guess that also means that you, as a consumer of models, are always like, okay, what's the market going to bring me next, right, to help me solve that next problem? What do you feel like you want to see from AI innovation to help your company, right?
It's a really interesting one. And we've been really pleasantly surprised at how some of the older models actually do really well. So take, for example, computer vision. Computer vision is a very solved problem. But some of the older models, they don't have the fat that the new ones do. So they're laser fast. And when you're not trying to figure out like what a pixel is, because see, we're not doing like automation of a mammogram. So we're a little bit less concerned about tiny pixels. We're more concerned about general variation in a screen. And so some of the older models actually outperform. So when we're looking at this, we're often looking at can they daisy chain, because we're trying to create an AND output. The second, I think, though, more interesting right now when we're looking at the world of LLMs is we've been pretty cautious in how we're using them because of the confabulations that come out. And to me, that's actually the biggest concern. So I don't think we have a single place where we just say, oh, well, like this just does the job. And in many cases, we are putting really tight boxes around how we use outsourced models, which are different, like at least the way we look at it, to in-sourced open source models where we've made adjustments.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It feels like you really understand and are pretty like sanguine about the limits of some of these models now. And when I was doing all my research and like reading about your life, right, and looking into everything, I read your long response to the journal article from a couple of years ago when the journal was like, this company, like they say they're doing all this AI stuff, but it sounds like they've overstated this. And you came back saying, we've always been clear with customers, right? Yeah. We've always said that we've used human-assisted AI, right? And it feels like you learned something from that experience about like how people interpret what AI means, which is perhaps, which is perhaps also valid today when there's like everyone's talking about it, right? And I feel like sometimes there's like misunderstanding or misinformation about what companies are really saying. So I would be interested to hear, like, looking back on that now that we're in this like AI hype point, what do you think you learned about that?
Look, I think I think this is the third cycle of hype. Not to critique the Wall Street Journal, because I think we've become friends since.
That's good.
I think the point is companies are either building models to sell or AI technology to sell, or they're using AI to automate parts of the process. And when you're at a Series A, I'd be really surprised if someone's built a full model and all of the AI they need, just because there's no amount of seed funding, unless you've raised $100 million seed, there's no amount of seed funding that will just pay for the compute, right? And the data scientists and the engineers and everything you need to do. So I think you have to kind of look under the veil and realize, well, the story was probably taken way out of context. That being said, I've done a lot of homework around what happened in November last year. Like, why are we in this third movement? Because the technology's been around for a while. It's not like LLMs just got released. It's not like the data got suddenly better. This has all been like really incremental. And what you realized was that we fundamentally changed the user interface. And this goes back to my earlier point saying customers don't want canvases. Up till now, using an AI platform was a canvas, and you would get a very scientific or engineering outcome. And most people couldn't wrap their heads around it. So it was like some distant Terminator dream, but nothing more than that. In November, the canvas got switched to WhatsApp. It feels like how you talk to your wife or your friends. In fact, the guys at OpenAI were so smart, not in the AI stack. I mean, they're very smart in the AI stack, but in the user interface stack. So ChatGPT actually knows the answer in a split second. Yet, if you ask it a big enough question, it will write word by word, and it could take 30 seconds to write it. And so that's actually because, from a human psychology perspective, if you get a response too quickly, you doubt the response, because it doesn't feel like it's been thought through. And so they slowed down the response so it felt like it was human-like typing back. And then you had all the nomenclature that got created, hallucinations. It's not hallucination. Hallucination is a human concept. It is simply a statistically incorrect outcome or a confabulation, right? Because you could argue it's a memory, it's an incorrect memory. And so you see actually the big invention was suddenly you made it into a canvas that everybody could access, everybody could use, felt human-like, and it freaked people out. So this hype is, I'd say, different to the last hype. The last hype was a critique on maybe companies Are they just using the AI bandwagon for the use of AI bandwagon? I can tell you from our own models and like how much we've built that, we definitely did not subscribe to the hype, but like everyone else, you have to start from zero and you build. And if, the journal's not patient enough to wait to see people do that, that's, their call and sort of their editorial call. I think the difference here is it's got in the hands of everyone and it freaked people out because it sounded human-like. But, but we are really in the AOL days of the internet. And so if you imagine when AOL came out, the internet didn't start when AOL came out. Dial-up didn't start then. It had been around for ages. But suddenly you had a disk that you could plug in, you could just type in, and like you were now connected to this thing called the internet. And so everybody thought the internet was around.
I loved at the end of the letter, I thought that rebuttal that you wrote, you signed it off with metta, which I believe is a Buddhist term.
Yes.
Are you a Buddhist?
No, I did the Vipassana.
Okay.
So I did 10 days of silence, and it's like going from black and white television to color TV. And so to me, it was better to sign it that way than something more stern or tongue in cheek. And in some respects, I'm so glad the article came out and they did the job they did, because it just allowed us to focus. And I always giggle because 3 months ago we got called by the Wall Street Journal to be one of 2 AI panel speakers to talk to their CEOs from around the world, their membership CEOs, on like how AI is going to be disrupting companies and what they should be doing. So it feels like the world has gone full round circle.
Tell me a little bit, we've been talking about AI, but you also mentioned some of those efficiencies that you've built around talent, like around those experts. And when I was talking with people for this interview, people said they have this, it's like kind of like an internal Fiverr where they can just kind of plug people in. Tell me a little bit more about that efficiency, because it's not just about AI, right? It's also about like making just software creation so much more efficient where you can, right?
Yeah, so look, I think when you break down building software, so there's one big issue in the world today, which is there are like some 30 systems that you need to build a piece of software. You have a tracking tool, you'll have Git, you'll have an IDE, you'll have Figma, then you'll have like someone's doing something for QA, someone's doing something for code deployment, someone's doing some pipelining system. Now, the system that connects these 20 is a human. We are neither high speed nor high fidelity. And we're subject to like varying degrees of standard deviation in how we operate. Good morning, bad morning, everything gets affected. So we took all the different things and said, like, first thing, we're going to make everything connected. Because if we make everything connected, it means we never move from this world of high fidelity to low fidelity. And so what do I mean by that? Imagine today you might produce something in Sketch or Figma as a design. You then export it to a PNG with red lines. So you've gone from high fidelity to flat file low fidelity. Then it goes to a developer who takes a ruler and measures it and calculates the pixels and then codes the pixels in. So now you've gone back to high fidelity because it's code. So now it goes to a QA person who takes a screenshot and puts red lines across the screenshot to show the area gone back to low fidelity. And in our world, we've kept everything constantly at high fidelity where we can go back to source, which means that we can build a prototype using a neural net, but we can go from prototype to code really fast with no human. And then we can bring the humans in to do the integration, the last mile, anything complex. And so the best way of looking at the model is you have a library of features. This is code and design. You have the car assembly line of lots of systems that is run by AI. In some places we use it as like computer vision, for example, or building a prototype using a neural net. And then you need to do deployment. That's just pure automation. We have our own, think of it like an enterprise service bus that allows these Lego blocks to talk to each other without needing to be hard-coded. And then to do the customization, we work with hundreds of dev shops. So it's not an internal Fiverr. It's more like an external Fiverr. And what we do is we say, okay, dear dev shop, you need to onboard the engineers. When they onboard the engineers, they get graded. So we have a builder score. And as they do work, the grade moves up and down. But the question is, where do they do the work? So they do the work on the assembly system. So they don't work on their local machines. They get containers. So we're getting all the telemetry. So we know if somebody spends 6 hours just hitting full stop, full stop, full stop, and nothing comes out. What we also know is who works really well on a Friday night to get something fixed for a Monday morning, because we have so much data. And we think of it like your credit score. We get every input that drives your output score, which is the builder score itself. And then we have an algorithm called BRAT. BRAT's job is to choose the right resource to work on the right set of features. So if we're building an application for someone, and let's say it's 50 features, we may break that into 10 swim lanes, 5 features per swim lane. And then each swim lane will have an expert assigned to it to do the customization, integrations, what have you. And then when they finish, Brat will score the work and then decide whether this person gets any more work in the future or not. And so we have like 3 people that manage at any given time probably thousands of developers working at this point.
Have you ever met some of the like superstar developers?
That's a great question. We have not, and that I think has been our biggest failing. We have made the mistake of treating our experts as capacity. Like we call it the capacity network. So I think that is just how we started and how we saw the world. And I think we are this year trying to make the shift to calling it our partners, and we're calling them creators because we know our customers are curators or experts. And really, how do we, the big pivot is, how do we get people to feel proud of the score they have, that they actually put it on their CV? Because you remember, like there was the day where you used to be a Microsoft certified professional. You would tell everyone I'm a Microsoft certified professional, or I'm a Salesforce approved, or a Cisco approved engineer. So we want people to carry the score, which means, like if you ask me, the big mistake we made is we didn't recognize them as a partner. We thought of them as a supply chain. We have to rebuild that world.
To be more of like the community, and
Exactly.
Totally. And then that incentivizes people to join that community of people.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't work with freelancers because and that's again the big difference to Fiverr. It's really hard to manage freelancers. And companies like Upwork and Fiverr have built an entire business around managing that pool. Our pool is managed by machines and 2 or 3 people. And the reason we can do that is because contractually we go through these dev shops and consulting companies, which is much easier to make sure like someone's going to show up. Because if you imagine if someone just felt like, I'm going on vacation, I'm not going to show up, we have a real issue because we're waiting for something to kickstart.
And until now, what has been the motivation, or how have those dev shops come to you? What's been that pipeline like? Like, how does that work?
So we have a capacity team, the 2 or 3 folks, and then maybe on top of that is another couple whose job it is to sort of reach out to the good and the great. So we work across 11 time zones in terms of capacity. I'd say that we probably have 2 or 3 or maybe 4 big time zones. Eastern Europe's one, India's another, East Asia. Starting to do a little bit more in South and Central America. And so we onboard the dev shop, and then they onboard their stuff.
Okay, super interesting. And tell me a little bit more about, going back to kind of our conversation around AI and how expensive it is to build models, and how there are some companies that are choosing to raise money to do that, right? How you've obviously raised a lot of money. I was about to say a bad word, but I'm not going to say the bad word on the podcast. So how do you plan to use that money? What's all that money for?
So, $450 million is since the beginning of time.
Okay.
The last round was $250. And, for us, it's sensible development. So we don't want to build models for the sake of it. At the same time, I was about to say a bad word, a ton of patents. From like how we deploy, how we use the model we've created, which gives us a really unique footing. So out of the 250, I would argue at least 40 to 60% is around both organic and inorganic R&D. So there are things that we would never build, but others have solved the problem. And that problem might be better housed sitting in Builder. There are other areas where, no, we really need to own this piece and we will build it. We're doing a lot of work around, I say we'll never build a model. We're doing a lot of work around like the intent model, trying to understand in either a response from the customer or a response from the LLM. Today we can extract meaning, but can we really get an intent for like what did that mean? And how do we better leverage 6 LLMs and choose the right answer from the right one? But then as we move between LLMs, we need to be able to carry the conversational context through it. So some of that is AI work, some of that is not AI work. We're doing a lot of novel work now around code complete. So one of the unique things that Builder has is we have this knowledge graph. And this knowledge graph maps together features, bases, their relationships. But what it's now suddenly going to be able to do is map together the commits of code. So we know that when these 5 features came together and the customer said this, it was this user story, and this was the code written. And so we've got this massive triangulation that we've been able to do. So now when someone says something similar to this intent model, we know what this means, and we can generate the customization so we can reduce the amount of human effort needed. Now, that's not been done before, so that is all novel being built in-house.
And what kind of talent do you need to do to do that?
So Natasha is 12 people just looking at conversational AI. And like we have 2 people just looking at intent, 2 PhDs looking at it, because it's stupidly difficult.
Totally.
Another one we're looking at is, imagine you have a database. Boring topic for everyone. Imagine you have a database. And let's just say you have a purchase database and a supply table. Purchase table and a supply table. And they both have the word amount. We need to be able to extract meaning. Like this amount is the selling amount. This amount is the buying amount. They're very different amounts. They cannot just be like, oh, it's amount. It must mean the same thing. And so we have a team that's trying to basically figure out what specific data means, which feeds into intent, feeds into conversation. And then the code complete team is actually, it's a natural language problem, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to, so today what we've been able to do, you can go from every conversation you have with someone at Builder is recorded and it gets transcribed. And then Natasha looks at that conversation and draws meaning. What meaning does she draw? She said, oh, they talked about this, which is related to login. Or they talked about this, which is related to purchasing. And so it gets tagged to the right feature. Then we know all the subgraph of features that are related to that, right? So now we've got a lot more meaning for this piece of text. We then convert it to a user story. Now an expert builds customization. So we've got a team that's basically trying to model the relationship between the spoken word and the code, so that when we get the next set of spoken words, we kind of know what the generated code is going to be like.
Exactly.
But in really, and to your point, it's in very small containers. Because in a small container, the confabulation or the statistically inaccurate outcome really reduces. It's when you go to an LLM and say, build me an app to do X, that you're going to get like vastly random stuff getting shot at you.
Interesting. So what does that mean for like the future of human assisted AI, and like how much AI will be able to penetrate, for lack of a better expression, software development and software building?
So look, I think we were at a world where it used to take 10 people to build a piece of software. With the low code, no code, we went to a world where it took 8 people to build a piece of software. So it's like not a disproportionate gain, maybe 7. We've gone to a world where it's about it's between 1.2 and 1.8 people to build a piece of software. The issue we have is demand still far outstrips supply. And so if we can get to a world where it's 0.6 or 0.5 on an average, or 0.8, I feel like you're going to start to see a demand and supply match. But also, we're not having people customize the same thing all over again. There's an element of, how many apps you have on your phone that have login? How many of those have Facebook login? Someone wrote the code for that every single time. That makes no sense to me.
Totally. Completely. So you just build that, as you said, those little blocks are just becoming part of this huge library, right? And then you just pick the right books.
And
right?
then you customize like the last mile. And if suppose on an average block, 20% is customization. If we can reduce the 20 to 10, we give people so much better outcomes.
So what's like one of the hardest things to automate or like processize out of that 20% of customization? Say it's 20% customization.
It's the entire, it's like to get to 80 is big steps and you get there.
Yeah.
And each step has a massive outcome. Like, for example, just taking code and making it reusable is not trivial, but it gives you disproportionate impact. And so what do you have to do in that? You need to be able to put a signature on code so you know it's not been tampered with. You need to build this bus that can allow it to snap like, Lego base plate. Now you get to customization. Customization by itself is not reusable because it's customization. So you're going to think of it like it's more like machine translation. So if you can, Google Translate is awesome now if you go from French to Italian or from English to Italian. We're trying to go from spoken word to code. So that is very hard for a number of reasons. One, you need to make sure you have graphed all the snippets that you can work up from. And the second thing is these LLMs are really widely trained, so they're very noisy. We need to figure out what's the right mechanism. Do we just build something in-house? And this is the discussion we're having right now. Do we use something out and then, like we built the intent model, we build another model around it that corrects? Because we have such a tight relationship between features and spoken language and code, we can be a lot more accurate. But that is an unsolved problem yet. So the reason I say it's very difficult is we haven't solved it. But if we solve it, the difference is it will only give us a 10% gain.
Yeah.
It'll take us from 80 to 90%. Whereas when we solve reusable code and we solve reusable design, it gave us a 0 to 80% gain.
Right, exactly. Totally. Tell me a little bit about being based in, like, obviously your headquarters are in London. What is it like being, I guess, a British AI company? Why build here? Why not go to the heart of AI in Silicon Valley?
Well, number one, everyone's left, right? I lived in San Francisco from 2011 till 2017, and it was very different in 2011 and exceedingly different in 2017. And I think during COVID, it probably accelerated the move everywhere else. I think the real reason is when you look at most of the novel development, you will find origination back to one of three places: Cambridge, London, because of UCL and Imperial, or Tel Aviv. You then have like the second hotspots. You have Paris, you have Sophia Antipolis, you have Tehran, you have Stanford, but you will always find a link back to the UK. And I think it's just a really strong talent pool. And so you look at DeepMind, it's here. Anthropic has got engineering here. In fact, I don't know any of the big AI players that don't have engineering in the UK. I see the third is cost. We're very sensitive towards spending wisely because you never know when there's a winter coming. And a really good, well-paid engineer in the UK or a PhD or a data scientist is probably about 50% the cost of the West Coast.
How much would you say on average that person would cost in the UK? Or how much would the salary be?
I think, look, data science and machine learning engineers right now, it's a very high variance, but it's somewhere between 100 and 200,000 pounds. And if you really pump it in specialist areas, you'll be like 2 to 300, 2 to 400. In the US, no one gets out of bed for less than $500,000, right? So you're already off. The sort of spectrum in terms of cost. And then there's other markets in Europe as well that are really solid, like Sophia Antipolis is one of the largest tech parks in Europe. No one really talks about it. And it has two AI specific engineering schools there. So you're sort of seeing that bubble in Europe be really quite strong. And it comes down to a strong emphasis on math.
Yeah. Do you see more competition for that talent now that you've got some of the US companies?
100%.
Yeah.
It's not trivial. It's why we set up Sophia Antipolis in the first place. So we have a small team which we're expecting to grow, so that we could balance availability and the talent set.
Yeah, it's super, like recently Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, said that it was hopeless for India to even try and make its own foundation model to compete with this company, also due to talent, right? Do you think that Europe can even compete with that wave, that like...
Oh, I mean, you have to look at the team that makes up OpenAI to see where they originated from. And that gives you the answer. I'd say that in history, there have been many folks that have doubted a region to be able to do X. And usually the region's been proven right, not the person that doubted the region. Like, you look at the entire moon program. You can't have a conversation about India these days without talking about the moon program, right? And you look at the entire moon program, and it was cheaper than the Gravity movie to build the movie. It's like a $50 million cost. So most startups in Europe that are trying to build AI are raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and we just sent someone to the moon. We sent a robot to the moon, to the southern side, which no one's done, in $50. So I think it's very hard to say that a population of 1.5 billion cannot produce X. And I also think the same thing applies to Europe, because you have such a diverse set of extremely technical folks. And you know, the world we're moving into is not a world of STEM. It's a world of polymath. If you go back in history, the only other time that I can personally think of that resembles this is when DaVinci was around. He was an artist. He was a philosopher. He was a mathematician. He wrote backwards so that people wouldn't, prosecute him. He designed bridges and plumbing systems. He wrote poetry, and it was the mesh of those talents that really allowed him to be quite unique. And so when you think about what the future of AI needs, right, it's not someone else building another LLM, because LLMs have a huge shortcoming. They have no concept of building rules. So you have to program the rules for them. But you imagine a child has a moral compass, has a value system. The value system generates rules through feedback. So I think as you think about going from AOL to, dare I say, BT broadband, your AOL's in the US, and everyone thought the center of the internet's there. Where's AOL today? And so I think history's told us this many times.
I feel like in our conversation as well, you've brought up, this idea of like trying to keep costs low, do things lean, kind of be scrappy about stuff. Have people come to you and been like, I want to give you all this money, go build lots of models? Like, has that happened? Or have you ever like thought about the danger of, with so much money flying around AI, the danger of raising too much and kind of that like foie gras financing?
The danger of, it's a really tough question. And I think it's a tough question for two reasons. First thing is, I think everybody needs to experience drought. If you don't experience drought, you don't know how to prioritize. And when you've only got $10 to spend on something and you have $30 of options, well, you've only got $10. You can't invent anymore. So that teaches you sort of like a really sort of sanguine way of understanding focus. At the same time, if you get money, you don't leave it on the table. But once you've built a muscle for being lean, you won't waste it. And I think raising to waste doesn't make sense. I think the world has also shifted from grow at any cost to investors now talking about free cash flow, profitability, EBITDA. Like, these three words were not used in most of the last 5 years. And they're now used every week in conversations. And so I would raise just, the benefit of raising earlier is you're raising experimental cash. And so with it comes like a degree that it is experimental. I wouldn't leave money on the table, but just make sure, and I think this is the key, make sure that when you raise from the right investors. Because if you are going to build foundational AI elements, or you're going to build platforms like ours, which take a huge amount of money to build, you need people that are patient, because you'll make a lot of mistakes along the way. The concern to me is always been in the recent 6 months is folks that were starting an AI company and then 3 months later they have an AI company. I was like, that's impossible. There's no way on the planet you build that in 90 days.
So where's your head at? Because I'm sure your investors are also coming to you and asking you questions about cash flow and about profitability. Where are you guys in that journey? Are you prioritizing growth right now, or are you looking to shift towards profitability? What's your North Star right now?
I think the North Star, if I'm honest, is somewhere in the middle. Like my message to the board has been, this is no longer a sprint. Now we're running a marathon. And so when you're running a marathon, you're running for the next 7 to 10 years. We're not running for the next fundraise of the next 12 months, because quite frankly, we don't need to. And if you're running a marathon, you're still trying to grow. But you're not growing at any cost, because growing at any cost with 1,000 people means you're burning through folks, you're winding folks up, like you're stressing people. You're not necessarily getting a great outcome. But at the same time, there were things that got us here. Being able to be really fast, being able to be really nimble. And so running the marathon is trying to bring some of what you did when you were sprinting into this larger framework. And I'd say the other part of it is, at some point, if you go public, you've got to recognize what the street is going to give you credit for. And you can't take a view of, this is me, I'm going to do it. You've got to play the other person's game. And if they're giving you credit for free cash flow and profitability, then if you're going to go public, you've got to start playing that direction. If you plan to stay private all your life, then you're sort of playing to a different direction. But then at some point, your investors are going to want an exit, and you're going to work with private equity or a management buyer or something or the other to sort that out. But for us, it's got to be growth, but not at any cost. We really want to drive towards free cash flow. It's very important. It's hard to tell when, because you're tempering R&D. It's your biggest spend, and you don't want to temper that too much, because you end up maybe falling behind. And that's why I think also making the right moves on what to buy versus what to build internally from scratch is really important.
So do you see a future potentially, 5-10 years down the road for the business as a public company?
I think it's tough to say today. I think all options are on the table. We have a really diverse set of investors, including a couple of really well-known corporates. We have a global business, which means we're ripe for a public listing. The timing, no one can tell where the market is right now. But I wouldn't rule it out in 3 to 5 years.
I think it's also interesting when you were talking about that growth, you talked about how the toll that can also take on the team. And again, part of all my research for today's interview, I was reading through Glassdoor. And you see some people have like an amazing experience at their company. They're like, I love this. And then you have some people who are like, it was super stressful. I left after 3 months.
Yeah.
How do you maintain culture when you are a fast growing company? And it's going to be stressful for people. How do you deal with that? And how do you try and bring people together?
That's a $1 trillion question. I don't have an answer for you. I feel like we're still figuring it out. Though what I would say is, when people are generally happy, they don't go to Glassdoor. And that is, to me, my pet peeve. It's like, come on guys, if you're happy, you should go as well. So either you've got ecstatic people and they go, but I don't know any company where everyone's ecstatic. Or you've got folks that are genuinely upset or burnt out or stressed out, and they're going. And what we do is we read all of them. So I read all the reviews. Joe, who's our chief operations, will read all of them, and we bucket them. Is this venting? Is this a competitor? Or is there hey, hang on, we've seen a pattern. How do we go fix the pattern? We've had some really good successes with Glassdoor, and then we have a period where we now focus on something else, and then it gets out of jig, and we're like, no, we need to go back and look at this. But I don't think looking at sites like that are reflective of a company's culture. I think what they're reflective of is what the edge of the organization feels. And I'd say a couple of things, right? So our culture has really got 2 strands to it. One is we have a value system called heart. So you've got to have heart. You've got to be an entrepreneur. You've got to be accountable. Accountability is about respect. It's about building trust and transparency. And we have an entire interview panel that only tests against hard. And I have approved folks, like, I really like this person, can we hire them? Gets rejected by the interview panel. And so we're trying to become more abstract in how we look at it. The second one is DAR. So everything we do is very deliberate. It's very authentic, and it's relentless. Now, relentless is tough. There are some companies that don't want to be relentless. And so the pace is different. Even if we're not going to grow at any cost, I don't think that means we would ever not be thinking about trying to solve the customer problem all the time. And I say, look, I think the last thing, and this is a humble submission, is I don't think we hired well all the time. We made a lot of mistakes. But
is that because you were growing too quickly, or you didn't have that kind of like framework around who you wanted to hire?
I think it's all of them, if I'm honest. When you grow at 2 to 3x a year for 3 years straight, we're still behind on this year's hiring, let alone next year's. And the size of the company we're at, we should be hiring for next year, not this year. But we're also now being really mindful of the right set of folks. How do we score? We're doing things like, okay, we've hired this role 10 times because it's, you need 10 people, like an engineer. Let's go backwards. Like, who are the best after a year? What did their interview look like? Can we give that data to an LLM and help us reposition? Like, when someone gives us an answer here, is it an indicator to something in the future? So we're really starting to unpack what gets us to X versus gets us to Y. But I'd say the journey up till now has been hiring to fill, which I think is always a disaster. You have to hire to progress, not to fill. I don't think we've done a terrible job at hiring for culture, but we've become much more specific on who gets in. And that's why if you sort of look at the propensity, use Glassdoor as an example, propensity, we have more good and average reviews now than we ever did before, even though we're hiring at a much higher clip. And I'd say the other one is we get more referrals now than we ever got before. So those are to me, the lead indicators. Like if you're getting more referrals, it generally means that enough of the cosmos of the organization is actually quite excited and happy that they're bringing folks in. And so you're not having to spend on the retention cost. But this is a work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge for every fast-growing startup. Like,
it's nuts. It's tough. And look, and the market doesn't help.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen massive wage inflation in every market, from India to the US. We haven't yet seen the cooling. Even though of all the layoffs that have happened, we've not seen the cooling. And I think COVID has not been helpful. COVID was great in the beginning. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. It wasn't great in the beginning. COVID bolstered productivity in the beginning because people felt safety in being in a tribe. When you came out of COVID, people found themselves again. But when they found themselves working from home. And so now trying to build team when people are working from home, so all of these things start to, they add up on each other.
Completely. Last question, because we're at the hour, but I could talk to you for another hour probably. You always describe yourself as chief wizard of all the companies that you founded. Why chief wizard, and who is your favorite wizard or witch?
That's a great question. I would say, so there's a funny story. I signed the Microsoft agreement as chief wizard. But I would say that life can be very serious a lot of the time. And what I found was when you say CEO and chief wizard, by the way, is not just we put it on the thing and then everywhere else is CEO. It's chief wizard everywhere, much to Stephanie's dislike. And it removes a little bit of the formality, the gravity of having a conversation with that person. And I realized this the hard way over time, where when you're 10, 20 people, everyone's very relaxed and have an honest conversation. And in your 1,000 people, you say hello to someone and literally their face goes blue because they're so nervous about they say the wrong thing or something or the other. So a part of it is removed. And the other one I'd say is it's still not qualified to be a CEO. I am very cognizant that I'm the person that will screw this up. And so I don't want the title until I know I won't.
I get that. Favorite witch or wizard all time?
Wow.
You can't be yourself.
That's a great question. I don't know that many witches or wizards. Actually, you know what? Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. I was going to say Glinda. I like Glinda.
Wizard of Oz. I really like Wizard of Oz. Like, there's something quite magical about it.
Totally. And we're getting a remake being shot in London.
Oh, really?
Ariana Grande. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Well, Wicked, like the musical.
Yeah.
That's all we have time for. If you want to hear more about what's unfolding in the world of European tech and startups, you can find our coverage on Sifted.eu. Let us know what you think of the Sifted podcast on Twitter, X, I guess. I don't know what it's called now. Or email hello@sifted.eu and join us next week.